Well, I couldn't be more excited to welcome you to tonight's discussion, welcome you to Astound. I'm Dan Turchin, I'm one of the co-founders of Astound. Just really excited to have you in our home for a couple hours. I'll first introduce my co-founder, who is our CEO, Nagi, sitting out here somewhere. If I could get all the Astoundians in the audience, raise their hand. Some of them are still working, we chased them to the conference. But thanks for joining us tonight. So we have what will hopefully be a provocative, engaging discussion. Light topic about the future of humanity. We've got some great panelists going to lead the discussion, but you know what? You're the celebrities. You're really what's going to drive this discussion. This is a special event. It's co-hosted by the Future of AI and IT Meetup, but also our friends from CSPA, represented by Nikki here. And we have AICUG, represented by Florence.
Hi,
Thanks,
everybody. Thank you.
all of those attending, as well as all of those on the stream. I believe we have those who are available to wait for it. China is streaming this globally. Where's the link?
It's on the Meetup page.
And we're very thankful to our special sponsor, First Republic Bank. I think Derek would like to introduce himself as well.
Yeah. Should I go up or stay?
Go ahead.
Okay. It'll super brief because we're talking about the future of humanity. So I don't want to keep us from that. I'm the First Republic Bank. My colleague Joe is in the back as well. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for allowing us to be in this beautiful place here. We're a private business bank. We are based in San Francisco. We would love to work with any or all of you, whether you're an individual, you're starting a company. We are open to just chatting. So we'll be in the back. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the sponsorship.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So we will introduce the topic briefly. You'll get to meet the panelists. We'll spend a bit of time chatting as a panel, but consider it all just fodder for the Q&A portion, which is where we'll really engage. So think about your questions, and then perhaps the most important part of the evening is after we've said our part, we're going to make sure you get ample time for networking. So a lot of the time, the kind of the enduring value of these events is the bonds, the friendships, the jobs that get offered, that sort of thing. So hold us to that. We'll make sure you get plenty of time for networking. What I need you to do, so it's a bit of an IQ test, so take out something with an internet connection first. And I've got 2 poll questions for you, not the eye test version. So I need you to answer 2 questions for me. The first one, I'm going to read it. I think it's hard to see in the back. So here's what you're going to do. We're going to see how well we follow instructions. So I will read the question to you. I'm not going to assume. I'm assuming you have better eyesight than me, but probably not good enough for you. You're going to text your answer to poll ED, poll POLL, EB like everywhere, .com / my name Dan Turchin 744. Okay? And the first question, I'll read it twice, right? Which of the following best describes your role? You're going to text the letter A, or you're going to go into that URL or text it. And option A is I write code. Option B is I wrangle data. So a data scientist type. Option C, I dream big, ... and fundraise. So for those of us who are fellow entrepreneurs, that should resonate. Maybe you'd reverse the order of those. Item B, I fund other people's dreams. That would be if you're an investor type. Option E, I attend meetups for the free beer and pizza. I'll just go ahead and apologize on behalf of Derek that we went and stuck. Yeah. We went top shelf on the refreshments. You'll just have to pretend this is a typical meetup. Or F, something else. We do have F. You can only vote once. All right. No stuff in the ballot box.
What's the number to text? 22333?
Yeah, exactly. And if you can read that, then don't say no. All right, we'll let the horses race one more time. A, your role is best described as you write code. B, you wrangle data. No data wrangling. C, you're an entrepreneur. D, you're an investor. What's that? E,
Can you repeat
you're
the number to
pizza and
text?
beer. Or F, something else.
Can you repeat the number to text to?
22333.
Oh.
9 of you have passed the IQ test. The other 141 of you.
Really just a typing test on the phone.
Or that. All right, we'll let the horses race for about 10 more seconds. Believe it or not, this is actually helpful for us as a panel to make sure we don't lose people. So the 10 people that have voted.
Birds are working for me. Yeah.
22333.
What is
You can
the,
do it either via the URL or via
URL will work.
SMS.
Can you do more than
why
one?
is the keyword?
You can only
as
vote
well?
once per idea.
Why is the
So
keyword
it's
as
three
well?
different, it's 1 plus 2.
And
Keyboard, I got both.
Keyword.
we're going to go ahead and
Just to
say
see? I mean, just to
2/5
the
if
letter.
you write code,
No, it does.
and 3/5 if you can't figure out how to text message.
Oh,
That's my confused.
Yeah, that's-
We're going to go ahead and open the next poll. This is too many words. I didn't realize I'd have to read them all. What do you hope to get out of today's meetup? Option A, I hope to, oh, that was quick on the trigger. That's impressive. A, I hope to learn how AI is being used to make humans better. B, I'm here to network with AI enthusiasts. C, I'm looking for a job or have jobs to fill. D, I just use FaceApp and want to learn how AI can stop the aging process. Or E, refer to my first answer, pizza and beer. All valid option. No F this time, or something else. You gotta pick one of those.
we know.
Same instructions, either the URL or 22333.
Still 22333, is it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
What's the key word? It says, only word that you want to present is that.
Text my name 744. I'll answer it.
Okay.
What happens to those?
There's only one poll action. If you're voting, you're voting on which one.
DAN church.
That's how most essays.
Diet.
Pretty clear you're here for the content.
Do you mind spelling your name for us?
DANTURCHIN.
Thank you.
Give that another 10 seconds. And we'll call that consensus.
Not less than 51% of that.
No.
Consensus, 51% of that.
Yeah.
Why?
That's that.
Well, that's only if the minors don't mind. And it's 41.
All right, thanks for the feedback. Happy to publish those results. I'm sure the horses will continue to race while we speak. Okay, so we've got two phenomenal panelists here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a minute, and then we'll tee up the topic. So first off, we've got Brian here, who's the CEO and founder of Ahura. And what Ahura is doing is very relevant to the topic tonight about AI making humans better. We're really lucky to have him. I'm going to have Brian introduce himself, his background, and why he's interested in the topic, what he's thinking about it, and then I'll tee up the discussion. Brian, go ahead. You got me.
So I was born in a tiny village with no running water and no electricity, out in the southeastern desert of Iran, a tiny village called Zanjan. And I was really fortunate because the government wanted to kill my entire family. And so we escaped the country to Turkey, where we lived in abject poverty for 2 years before getting our political asylum and our green cards to come to the United States. And the reason I said I was so lucky is because we moved to Maryland, where I had access to the best educational system in the world, at least one of them. And so in middle school, I taught myself quantum mechanics and differential equations. When I was 16, I started working at NASA on the Constellation X project. And when I was in college, I started my first company, where I went to people's homes out in Tennessee and Texas, in Oklahoma and Ohio, in Mississippi and Missouri. I sat down with 30,000 families to talk to them about their kids' education, to understand their hopes and dreams, the challenges that they had, and what they really needed to accomplish. And what that taught me is that even here in the United States, in ostensibly the most powerful country in the world, opportunity in education is still not evenly distributed across the population. And I realized I had to do something about that. More recently, I started Ahura AI. One of the reasons we founded the company is, if we go to the next slide here, right now we're at the precipice of what's called the fourth industrial revolution. We're at the precipice of losing 49 million jobs here in the United States over the next 5 to 10 years. Globally, that number is around 800 million to 2 billion jobs. We're talking about fast food workers, phone workers, truck drivers, retail employees, and office workers. This is a population that didn't do well in high school, didn't go to college, and hasn't been upskilled in over a decade. So to expect that this cohort of people will be retrained using the same system that failed them the first time around is foolhardy, right? And MOOCs were supposed to solve this problem, massive online number of courses, but of course, as we all probably know, 84% of people that sign up for a MOOC drop out. That's not a very good number. There has to be a solution to this. Because look, what I'm worried about is 3.5 million truck drivers, 97-88% of whom are male. About 85% of them have weapons. About 80% of them are former military. What happens when this cohort suddenly hits rock bottom? They can't feed their families. They can't put a roof over their kids' heads. When people are backed into a corner, they behave in ways that aren't necessarily good for society, right? What I'm concerned about is 2.5 million truck drivers parking their trucks horizontally across the 101, across 95, across every highway, with an AK-47 in the back of the truck with 300 rounds of ammunition, saying, hey, I can't get mine, right? Now, this may sound fantastic, but this has already happened. So last year in Brazil, diesel prices skyrocketed by about 10 to 15%, and truck drivers just parked their trucks on the highway, and suddenly they can get medicine to the cities, or food, or fuel. Society breaks down, right? This is a problem we have to solve. And unlike the first 3 industrial revolutions, where we had several generations to retrain the populations for the new jobs that were coming online, this time around we have 5 to 10 years max, which means people have to retrain themselves. So at Ahura AI, what we do is we leverage artificial intelligence to solve that problem. It turns out that if you collect over 10,000 biometric data points a second, like what we do, you can then personalize education for the individual. So rather than using artificial intelligence to personalize ads, to sell more widgets, or to get people scrolling endlessly on Facebook or Instagram, we leverage that technology and the largest set of biometric data that's connected to microassessments, quizzes, tests, engagement metrics, and so forth, to identify the optimal way to deliver the right content to the right person in the right format at the right time. We want to keep going. I'm not going to go through the team. Our team is awesome. We are building the team, so any of you coders that answered that question before, we are hiring an army of developers, so let's keep going. So our business model is a SaaS sales 3.0 model. We've bifurcated the value proposition, so we don't expect these folks that are retail employees in Sheboygan, Wisconsin that are losing their $10 an hour job to pay for their own training. So what we do is we talk to corporations who are in the process of firing tens of thousands of employees, and we tell them that, hey, this is going to be a massive problem for you from a PR perspective. And by the way, they agree. One of the executives at McDonald's told me they see this as a carbon offset for automation. So the corporations that have very deep pockets pay for it, and we then deliver this education and retraining and upskilling to the people that need it most. Let's keep this going. I only have a couple more slides here. So, so we already have $1.1 million worth of contracts pre-launch that we've already signed, and one more button. We just closed Apple for a pilot, which we're really proud of, to do training for their existing employees. Now, part of the reason that I built this company, if we can put one more, is that after I left NASA and after I had my first exit in my 20s, I had a chance to go back to Iran. I went to the village where I was born, Zanzibar, and I ran into all the kids that I used to play with when I was 4. And now, of course, we're in our late 20s, but all the folks that I ran into were illiterate. There were sheep herders and goat herders, and they spent 3 hours trying to convince me that the Earth is in the center of the universe. And that hit me like a visceral punch in the gut. Because we have the same background, we're from the same location, we have the same genes, ostensibly we have the same IQ, but we live these radically different lives. So I began asking the question of what would happen if every man, woman, and child around the world has access to the best educational system in the world. And so part of what we do as well at Her AI is for every seat or every license the corporation buys from us, we give a free license to someone in an underserved community globally. Right now, we're focused on women in India, women in favelas in South America, and in refugee camps in Syria, to provide this technology free of charge to folks around the world so we can level the playing field globally and enable the human race to have access to more brain power, more capabilities, and taking the ability to solve all the intractable problems that we face. So we're solving for SDGs, number 4, education, number 10, inequality. That's what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so next up, a serial entrepreneur, a very different perspective on the topic. Adam Blum, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm Adam Blum, CEO of Augur AI. We started Augur after the last, myself and a bunch of teammates started after selling our last company, which happened to be machine learning and education. It's a company called OpenEd. We actually used machine learning to predict what resources would be most effective for students and also to figure out what learning standards of individuals' resources, such as videos, were about. That was actually probably the 5th of several companies that use neural networks and machine learning to solve specific problems. The reason why we started Augur is we tried to use AutoML to do this, to build the most accurate predictive models. We used everything out there. We used DataRobot, we used H2O, we used AutoSKlearn, Teapot, etc. We hit 2 things. One is the accuracy of those of the AutoML was part one. So if you're a data scientist, I didn't see a lot of people say that data wranglers, you probably might say, geez, I used AutoSKlearn, I used Teapot, and it was a toy, and I called it DataRobot, and they were $3 million for a license fee. But it turns out even DataRobot's most enthusiastic customers say it needs it for baselining. So we wanted to create an AutoML tool that wasn't used for baselining, that would actually outperform teams of data scientists. The second thing we saw about the AutoML industry is that all of the APIs from all the AutoML vendors were clearly written by data scientists. They didn't use like common patterns for how do you do RESTful CRUD. They were clearly written by somebody who was sort of like spent their days like putting together Python so that something would just work. We felt very strongly that if you built a really great API that had great accuracy, and then you could tribute, start with, I've got some data in a SQL table or a CSV, could trivially train it, and you could get a predictive model, then you wouldn't just end up with data science as for the organization's biggest problems, where they spend multiple months with teams of data scientists. You can actually start taking any developer, and I noticed that most people did respond that they were developers, any developer that has an app, that has data, which I think is pretty much every one of the 26 million enterprise app developers. Now, if you want to make decisions and predictions from that data, you're not writing code that's using your own ad hoc business logic. You're not, creating some offline one-off predictive model that you then embed in it. You can actually embed all the steps of both automated machine learning and even just machine learning inside the app, and enable something we call AI as eating software. So you can actually, as disheartening as that may be to developers, you better get on this train of using predictive modeling in an automated way inside your applications, because other people will. If you aren't taking your apps that have business logic and saying, how do I automate getting that business logic instead of coding it myself, others will. So I'm not going to tell you, I wanted to tell you that much, that we're about more accurate AutoML, and we're about APIs for true developers to embed it, because it's going to certainly imply a lot of the things that I think AI will do.
Good. Welcome, panelists. I will share our perspective at Astound on the topic, tee up the discussion, and then we'll get into the meat of the panel Q&A. So at Astound, we have a vision for the future of work, and we think it's intricately connected to the future of humanity. Astound is an AI platform for employee service, and we're trying to define the service experience for the next billion employees at large enterprises that every day have routine requests for things like HR issues and IT issues and issues related to facilities or payroll or things like that, just kind of the drudgery of work in a large enterprise. And we think that today those interactions kind of sap the lifeblood out of employees. And employees whose lifeblood has been sapped, turns out, are less motivated to do their work. And when they're less motivated to do their work, they don't work as efficiently. When they don't work as efficiently, business suffers. We don't think that should be the way it is. So what we did is we took the principles of AI and machine learning and wrapped them around the life cycle of employee service requests. And it turns out, when you do that in the right way, you totally transform the nature of work. You transform it into something that means sitting on hold, waiting for the call center to answer your question. As mundane as your question is, it takes 2.5 hours on average to reset a password. That's insanity, right? Worldwide, every large enterprise, same problems. And we think that should be more like an automated process that takes seconds. Now, specific to this topic, the way we look at the problem is by thinking about every actor in that life cycle and infusing intelligence into that process for that actor. So specifically what that means at Astound is for AI-driven applications in support of 3 different personas in the life cycle of that request. For the employee, we offer a virtual agent that uses NLP to autonomously diagnose and resolve routine issues. But very germane to this topic, the next 2 applications built on the Astound AI platform are specifically to make the human smart. We think that's one of the core principles of being a responsible vendor of AI into the enterprise community is first to make the human smarter. So the second app on the Astound platform is called Predict. And what it does, it finds the right assignment group or the right assignee for every problem. Turns out that's kind of a big deal in the enterprise. Frequently you'll hear there are 6 to 8 people, FTEs, full-time equivalents, dedicated to just doing triage and routing incoming incidents. It's a broken process. 2 of the 2.5 hours, on average, spent resolving an issue is spent having these issues hop around different assignment groups. Third application on the Astound AI platform is called Advise. And Advise is the magic. So what Advise does is once Predict has delivered the work to the right queue, Advise tells the live agent what to do. So it takes kind of that novice agent who's scared to death of the phone ringing. That's like they rue the day when the phone rings, despite what we all think as employees, because they're totally exposed. Right? They're not the expert that you think, this all-knowing being. Like, they have to do the same research that you would have to do to fix your laptop, not with Advise. Advise uses AI and machine learning models to essentially take the most novice agent in the call center, turn them into an expert. So you fuse that digital brain onto their actual brain, and you've made the life of the call center agent much better. The last application on the Astound AI platform is called Analyze, and it uses predictive analytics to figure out across all of these automated interactions happening across Answers, the virtual agent, and Predict and Advise. What are the patterns that indicate the health of the service? So how do I prevent that Wi-Fi outage? How do I prevent payroll from going down the day before we're going to pay the employees? What are the signals that indicate an unhealthy service before there's any disruption that anyone notices? So in terms of the principles behind the AI platform and behind those 4 apps, we espouse what we call responsible AI. 3 principles of responsible AI. Increasingly, what you're going to see is that any vendor of AI, whether it's us doing what we do for employee service, or Brian does, or Adam does, etc., algorithmically determined decisions will need to be very transparent to those who are on the receiving end of the decision. So whether it's your credit that's being assessed, or your kid whose education or educational level is being assessed, you'll be aware of when an algorithm aided in the making of a decision. Number 2, AI needs to be explainable. We'll get into this in the discussion. But when a decision has been made on yours or your relatives or your kids' behalf, it needs to be very clear what the parameters were that went into that automated decision. Number 3, responsible AI means AI is configured. So you must be able to do some kind of a sensitivity analysis on the data that went into explaining what the decision made was, but there needs to be instrumentation built into the AI model so that you can see if a lever or 2 were turned, what the corollary impact would have been on the decision that was made. So 3 principles of responsible AI. You'll be hearing a lot more about that in the form of regulatory frameworks and that sort of thing. At Astound, we're pioneering these principles and trying to make sure, as a community of vendors, of practitioners, that we're all committing to practicing responsible AI. Now, shifting gears, so I want to get into the panel discussion. This is a fascinating time. Not to be here at Astound, although I do think it's a fascinating time to be here at Astound. It's a fascinating time to be alive in Silicon Valley. The fact that a couple hundred of us can get together in a room and with a straight face debate the future of humanity and go out back into our other lives can influence the future of humanity, like I'd argue that that's an opportunity that we have that no culture, no set of individuals has had. The future of humanity is being determined within a 5-mile radius of us. And the fact that, whatever, a couple hundred of us with the audience screaming, that we actually have an opportunity to influence that, that's mind-blowing. So you can't open a newspaper, blog, read your Twitter feed, etc. these days without, learning about the next cataclysmic shift that's underway. That we're influencing. We're the ones shaking the earth here. Last week it was Microsoft investing $8 billion in OpenAI. So what is OpenAI's charter? AI good. Right? Beautiful time to be alive. The most valuable company on the planet is putting $1 billion toward helping us develop AI for good. Today, literally hours ago, the current administration's Commission on Artificial Intelligence was just formed a couple months ago. Delivered their first set of recommendations. One of the 3 recommendations is how can we, as a community, as a country, as a nation, as a people, how can we espouse these principles and the technology behind AI to better empower the next generation of workers, of workforce to embrace AI. It's so germane to the conversation we have. You can't read a tweet these days without hearing about some leader, some, whether it's a political figure or a tech celebrity, a Musk, a Zuck, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, maybe rest in peace, et cetera, talking about this issue at opposite ends of the spectrum. It's such a polarizing topic. You've got Andrew Ng, who taught a few miles away from here and has become quite a popular figure, quite a polarizing figure, saying, fearing the bot apocalypse is like fearing overpopulation on Mars. We got all these conflicting opinions, all these great ideas, these great thinkers, helping us kind of reimagine the future of humanity. And so with that as kind of, some opening remarks, kind of to set the tone of the conversation, I asked the two panelists a question that's not intended to be rhetorical. It's more of a philosophical question, and maybe in the networking period, I'd love to hear more views on it. What is artificial intelligence? And what does AI for good mean to both of you?
So, there's a lot of questions about ML versus AI, deep learning, facial recognition. AI, as we all know it, I'm not going to get into it, you guys are all experts in it. But the question is, do we use AI to build weapons of war, to like Boston Dynamics or others, to be autonomous killing machines, whether or not a government accepts that there's someone behind the trigger or not? Or do we use AI to solve a lot of the problems that we face? Do we use it just to sell a bunch more widgets and get people to be more addicted to their phones and their devices? Or do we use it to actually solve some of the biggest problems that we face, whether it's ocean acidification or overfishing or climate change or any of the other catastrophic things that could remove life from this planet and change our lives as we know it? So I think AI for good is, as Singularity would say, using exponential technology to impact a billion people's lives to actually improve the lives of everybody we touch.
So I'll touch more on the AI for good and what does that mean. So you put together a framework, Dan, where you talk about how I'm sort of mentioned twice this whole issue of good means explaining. But the fact is there are many, many algorithms, many problems that would be very difficult to solve without algorithms that are far less explainable. So within Augur, or any AutoML tool, let's just make the general case. If you have something you want to predict or classify, so you throw your CSV or your table at it and you say, give me some models. And some of those models are quite explainable, so that's good. Some of those models are very explainable. Many of those models, especially the deep learning model, and the deeper, the less explainable, are much less explainable. Everything is explainable to a certain point. Even deep learning models will have some level of explainability in them to sort of broad brush characterize it. But the more difficult the problem, where of course AI can be even more impactful, you're going to have all kinds of crazy nonlinearities and all kinds of hidden layers that behave in unexpected ways. You start getting to a 4-level neural network for a difficult problem, you can be sure that that explainable summary really doesn't capture why it's so accurate. So as a practical matter, and this is just down to the nuts and bolts of being a practicing data scientist and a practicing developer, it's always a trade-off. It is a trade-off between accuracy and explainability. So I would actually maintain, I've told you that I did this company called OpenEd in the past. I still help them out because it's making a lot of difference for students. And I say, in order for me to continue to sort of volunteer our services for this, quasi for a nonprofit that now owns them, I'm only choosing the most accurate things because I want to make. That's my principle of AI for good. Is I want to give them the thing that works the best. And as a matter of fact, for recommending a resource, it's actually more important that it just works than it's explainable. Now, we could probably have another discussion about when does explainability trump accuracy? And I submit that there are use cases where that's the case. But there's many more use cases when you just say, I'm going to cure them. So I'll give you another example of a company that I continue to help on a volunteer basis, a company called Health Tree. So what they do is I'm on the board of them, but we donate all those services to them. What they do is they try to figure out, based upon patient genetic data, diet data, environmental data, medical data, which are the many treatments for two particular diseases, myeloma and ALS, which basically, like, you have that, you don't get cured. You can be in remission, but they're incurable diseases. And medicine and the traditional statistical models have not solved them. So if we said, you have to do an explainable model, you'd be back to like linear regression or some much more conventional model that would be crazy explainable. But guess what? If you could explain it, it would be cured because conventional statistics would have worked. So we only use unexplainable models. Why? Because we've already determined an explainable model is close to statistics, which have been applied to these difficult medical problems for decades. So the new thing is actually the deep learning model, for which when you say I'm going to explain it, you're just approximating it. You're not explaining it. You're kidding yourself if you think you're explaining it. And so I maintain that Health Tree has an obligation to use the most accurate model, explainable or not. Because if you say I'm going to stick to the explainable models, you are confining yourselves to conventional medical science that has failed on these diseases for decades. So again, it doesn't mean that in applying AI for good, you shouldn't step back and say, for a loan decision, maybe I better be able to explain why. But there's broad class of problems. The accident might be even broader than these exceptions, where you actually have an ethical duty to have the model that explains it best. Now, you do have to guard against things like overfitting. You need to do cross-fault validation to make sure you're not kidding yourself. But given the fact that you're doing a good job of cross-fault validation, a good job of post-hoc testing, I'm going to make the controversial stand, and Dan and I can arm wrestle about this, that it's more frequent that you need to prioritize accuracy over explainability.
Brian, you break the tie. What's explainability? It doesn't matter.
So in my world and the view that I have is explainability doesn't matter because it slows down the AI. It makes it less effective if you over-index for explainability. However, I will say that there are certain areas where you have to make sure that the quality of the data that you're using is proper. Because right now we have a massive issue with AI that I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with. We face this constantly with education, right? With facial recognition, the more melanin you have in your skin, the harder it is for us to collect the data on those individuals. As we all know, if you have more melanin in your skin, sometimes even those automated SIP dispensers don't work. I mean, that's ridiculous, and that's not even AI, right? But we know that if you aren't testing for the right things, if you don't have the right data, it's just not going to work effectively. There's a famous example, sorry to throw Amazon under the bus, where they created an AI to determine of the hundreds of thousands of resumes that they get, who should actually make it to a screening call. Well, it turned out that the AI decided that like 98% or I might be slightly off on this, but around 95 to 98% were white males. And it turned out if you had lacrosse or crew on your resume, you were 10x more likely to get a call back. Well, we have to make sure that the data that we feed into the AI is right. So, for example, for us, we know that we can't just do all our testing and modeling based on Harvard students or white males. We have to go to Africa, we have to go to Asia, we have to have an incredibly diverse set of data to feed that information. Now, if you do that, I 100% agree that it doesn't have to be explainable. The risk that we take is that we don't know if companies are always using diverse data sets. And so that is a requirement that we need to be aware of. We need to make sure that as ethical AI experts that we make sure in all of our organizations that we're making sure that the data that we collect and use are actually going to be good for humanity. So I don't know if that helps either side. That was kind of a half an hour.
Total cop out. We're gonna let you all break the tie. We'll park that, pick it up in Q&A or networking. So Brian Brand, a good example. I'm in a dog pile on Amazon, and you might have heard, probably a lot of us have heard the example of the Amazon facial recognition service was fed mugshots of whatever it was, a million criminals. And then as a way to test the accuracy of the model, it was then fed the 435, face to the 435 members of Congress, who it turns out 28 who knew are criminals, not really. There's now a bill going through Congress that will prevent any federally funded housing projects from using facial recognition technology as a security protocol to allow residents into the building. The argument is, it turns out, to Brian's point, facial recognition performs 10% worse on underrepresented minorities. The concern is that if the underrepresented minorities, which tend to be overrepresented in federally funded housing projects, all of a sudden feel unwelcome because they're not allowed into their building, then you play that scenario out and it could lead to a shift in the demographics of who feels like they're welcomed into public housing. Both big problems. Question of example. We as technology leaders, as AI pioneers, have good intentions. How do we prevent those good intentions from generating value?
So, yeah, I think I want to be clear that even though I think probably it's more often where primacy is accuracy, but I have no idea, is it 60-40, 70-30, is it the other way? I do think that the recent emphasis of asking the question, should this be explainable, is a very healthy thing. And so I think frameworks to sort of like make these decisions on a case-by-case basis of like, does it need to be explainable? How explainable it does. I also think it helps as a data scientist where you decide a priori, what are my goals? Is it just accuracy? Is it just explainability at any cost? Is there a way to cost that trade-off? Because it's usually a trade-off. And there's a third dimension, which is runtime performance. There's a lot of things that explain better, but you just can't make a decision fast enough. You're trying to do it, 20,000 times a second. So I think this whole dialogue is good, both to do do AI for good and just to do good AI is to move the discussion beyond just what's the most accurate thing, but actually have a framework for trading off between accuracy and explainability.
And I'm gonna say something a little bit provocative and push back really quickly. I think that here in Silicon Valley and even in New York and in the tech community, we like more to talk about how ethical and how good we are and how we want to change the world than when we're actually making all the decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're beholden to our investors, we're beholden to constantly going up this exponential scale. And so I think it behooves us, if we are to follow through with integrity on who we say we are, right? We put ourselves out in the tech community that we care more about the world, we care more about diversity, we care about all these things, more so than the banking world or the consulting world or any number of other worlds. And yet, we still only have 2% of female founders get funded, right? We still have a massive diversity problem in most of our companies. We still make decisions like Zuck made, and not to make an attack here, but on selling a lot of our Facebook Messenger data to a whole bunch of different companies and to Cambridge Analytica. If you guys haven't seen the great hack, I highly recommend it, right? And I think we need to police ourselves. I think we need to raise our voices within our own organizations to our peers to hold each other accountable, because there's a very real danger that if we don't, we're going to actually cause a lot more damage to the world than we're able to fix. Because as we know, tech moves a lot faster than any other industry. And so if we're not very proactive in solving for these problems, they can get out of hand really quickly.
So, to follow up, Dan, when you, I do think it's cool that you guys started putting together this more sort of like responsible AI usage. I do have an issue with the, must always use an explainable algorithm, but you did along the way to getting to that, you mentioned some things that I think absolutely should be part of the framework, which is not necessarily explainable algorithm, but that you are, and I would say probably in some broad class of uses of it, certainly things where you're making public policy decisions, things that have a major impact on people's lives. The features used in a model is something that I do think is a best practice. Saying these are the features. We're not saying anything that algorithms explainable. It would still be a 5-layer neural network that nobody will parse through. But these are the features. This is my objective. But and that's something I would heartily sign on to for a very broad class of problems. That should be exposed, especially when it has major impact. It's either something done publicly, through government, or it has major impact on people's lives. I think you could extend that framework. You could add some more principles. Like I can't think what all those would be, but one of the additional ones is reproducibility. And this is actually something I think it's going to be the next big. Like explainability is like the flavor of the month. Everybody's talking about it. All our competitors are talking about it. If you go to Augur, we have some really nice explainability things that you work for many algorithms. I think the next thing is reproducibility, because you see a lot of people saying, my model is this accurate, right? And it's not reproducible, so you're trusting
Just closely related to explainability.
well, correct. It's this accurate, but you can have an unexplainable algorithm. Absolutely, it's 5 layers and completely unexplainable, but that it is reproducible results. Because you've identified what the features are, you say the data set is here. Luckily, there's great things like OpenML, OpenAI, and Kaggle, which all have all these data sets. But I will tell you, all of our competitors in the AutoML space make claims that are not reproducible. If you go and stop by our booth, you'll see our accuracy, and it's all with these OpenAI data sets. What I would like to see is the industry in general, whether it's AutoML or machine learning tool or whatever, you make some claim and it's reproducible. And if it is one of these like important data sets that either has massive impact on people's lives, right? Like you get into college or you don't, or you get the life-saving treatment or you don't, or it's some public thing, it's done by government. Those machine learning models need to be reproducible. Like anybody should be able to take the data, it has this set of features, it has this target, it's running with this algorithm, with these hyperparameters. I can take the data set and reproduce your results. And if you're skeptical that that's not happening, let me give you an example of some of the things that you can find out with these things. So Google just recently entered the AutoML space. And most people that do AutoML do something called cross-fault validation. Data scientists, I'm assuming you're all doing it. Because we're in Silicon Valley, we do the best things.
0% of them are data wranglers.
Oh, really? Okay. I assume they were all wrangling their data. They didn't have time to do it.
Too shy to admit it.
So it turns out if you're not doing cross-fault validation, you're really building bad models. You just are. Like the days of I have my training set, I have my test set, and I have a validation set. That's the wrong way to do stuff. You're guaranteed to build overfitted models. You have to be doing cross-fault validation. You have to take all the permutations of train and test set, or you're being a bad data scientist. Well, it turns out with Google's AutoML for tables, you don't have cross-fault validation. Go check me. Go, data scientists that are on your laptops right now, go check right now. You don't do it. You have to manually label your train and test sets. You will build bad models. You will build overfitted models with that. So my point here is not too harsh on Google. My point is, if you were building models that you then said, I'm going to create this model and it's explainable with this, and it's reproducible, every single data scientist would hit the fact that you built a model that you didn't do cross-fault validation. Because they'll do their training and test set, right? It's probably not going to be their own training and test set. They're going to give a different answer and they're going to say, boom, it's not explainable. Whereas if you said, well, I did this and I did tenfold validation, it will yield the same result. So I do think a framework for sort of responsible AI usage so that when you're making either public policy decisions or you're making impact on people's lives, and has things like identify my features, identify my algorithms, but also I identify, here's the data set. You try. In fact, would help in your framework, Dan, and I actually think would make more of an impact towards AI for good and good AI than just explainability.
So a whole bunch of experts, and kind of the modal answer about when we will AGI, artificial general intelligence, humans, computers being able to perform human tasks, somewhere around 40 years from now, with a standard deviation of 40 years. But most would agree it's not. Well, standard deviation.
It might happen tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that doesn't come out right. Yeah.
Probably not
No less
this
than
year.
40 years. So Brian, you're pitching an Apple or Apple number 2 in your case on reskilling their workforce, potentially for a future that may not exist in their lifetime. Why invest in retraining them? Should I clear the bot today?
I don't think we have any real fear of the bot soon. As you mentioned, 40 years is a long time. I think a more germane question here with that specific thing in mind is, what world do we live in right now, right? Because the world of the past is over. There used to be a world where you studied for 12, 16, 20 years, and then you worked for 30 and 40 years, and then you retired. I mean, my parents' generation was told, hey, go get a job where you can stay with the company for 30, 40 years, you get your gold watch, and you retire, right? My generation was told, hey, you need to expect that you're going to change jobs 6 to 8 times during your career. The true reality for the kids that are going through school right now is that they're going to have to switch careers 6 to 8 times during their whole lives. So they're going to have to learn throughout their whole lives. They're going to have to work throughout their whole lives, and they're going to have to experience leisure throughout their whole lives, because retirement is frankly a joke. It's not really going to happen for most of us in this room, right? And so as entire industries rise and fall in shorter and shorter periods of time, people will need to retrain, take on those new careers in entirely new areas, and then develop entirely new skill sets that were radically different from what they've done before. And so, yes, I do think that training is going to be a constant thing. I think over the next 40 years, we're going to see radical changes where data scientists will then become doctors or what have you. We will be doing things that are so radically different than what we've done in the past that we need to constantly retrain, constantly upskill ourselves to be able to continue to work. And I think we're super far away from AGI. I think that's not something we should talk about.
Is AGI even the holy grail? Is it the concept du jour? Or is the overhyping of AGI going to lead to the next AI winter? Out of perspective on that.
Yeah, I think we're quite a ways away from that, and I think I think there's just so many specific uses of AI that we should just concentrate on and get that there. And I think doing that work in the most responsible way that has the most benefit, I think could be most valuable. Just touching on this whole thing of like unemploying people though along the way, which is certainly going to happen. Truck drivers, fast food workers. Yeah, there's no question that's happening. I think one of maybe an additional principle in AI for good. So it'd be fun to collaborate with. Maybe we can expand this and get some traction, in a more broad way. AI for good is, and this is a way that both helps people and helps the AI. Is a lot of the successes in AI have been done where they put a human in the loop. We did this at OpenEd. We had you need to label data, right? You need to have the positive, like, yeah, that worked or that didn't work. What's interesting is you have this trade-off of you need labeled data, so you get these humans that are helping you get the labeled data. What I've seen less of is something that sort of embraces the human intelligence in the process of getting that initial labeled data, but continuing to involve them so that you can like deploy, say, perhaps undertrained models, where you have more human assistance, and then all that human intervention keeps training it. One of the things that can help in this, by the way, is, you and I have talked about this, and is we call AutoML, which is like, you use AutoML to build a model, and it's sort of half-baked, so you have to like embed the human to like say yes or no, but then all that labeled data to say yes or no, that's helping your, half-baked, barely trained, under data model gets out there, but then, as you see you're getting more and more labeled data, you automatically retrain it, so you AutoML, you retrain it, you get more and more data there. And a lot of the best projects I've seen do this, what I think needs to happen more of, and this is not something I claim that we do at Augur, is more of this framework that includes that human in the loop for getting labeled data, and then the ongoing human in the loop beyond that, and basically stepping like one layer above this, okay, I trained my system and it's getting prediction, to frameworks for embedding humans in the loop for labeled data and for dealing with undertrained models. The reason I think this can be really helpful is instead of the way most people think about it is like, geez, if I just have a good enough three-layer neural network, I can fire the truck driver. You can actually start getting undertrained models out there to start getting some benefit, and you're getting the humans involved for their intelligence, and you get this sort of graceful degradation from all human to all AI, and you create all kinds of opportunities. One is continued human deployment, but then that person that's really great at cooperating with the emergent AI can apply it to other problem domains.
So what was the human in the loop use case
at OpenEd? Oh, so what we did is we would say, okay, I think we would go analyze video transcripts, and we'd say, I think this video is about this particular skill. And when we first did it, it was about 75% accurate. And so we had subject matter experts, with like former teachers that really knew the stuff to say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Now that model is over 98% accurate, right? But it turned out, so we took those subject matter experts, and they're on to other problem domains. Like in math, it's crazy accurate. We don't need a human. But again, like those teachers weren't, these subject matter experts weren't out of a job. There used to be a business, by the way, and there are businesses that are out there that have hundreds of subject matter experts sitting in a room watching videos saying, well, Google has this porn or not porn, right? But in this case, in education, there are still old line businesses that say, yep, that's a good math video for areas of shapes. But AI, for math at least, you don't need that anymore. There's absolutely no purpose. But you can take those humans that we used to confirm those to do trickier things. Like one of the things that's a big thing in education now is social and emotional learning. Like, that's really hard to have, the analysis of the transcript say, oh yeah, this video is teaching you what grit and persistence are, or this video is teaching you this. But it doesn't mean it's unsolvable. You can take a lot of these skills that of both embedding the human in the loop to do the easy problems like identifying math video and put them on the harder problems. And I think the same thing could apply to, truck drivers on emerging truck systems, helping the system get better at driving. That truck driver can probably go help some other emergent automation.
So Brian, back to you regarding human in the loop. So it's pretty well known that the most expensive form of delivering education is the traditional kind of one-to-one learning technique. So presumably, there's AI in education in our future. What does that look like? What does the future of education look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I believe we expect way too much from our teachers. Right? We expect them to be content experts. We expect them to be delivery experts and to be more interesting than Beyonce or Facebook. We expect them to be therapists and social workers, and now apparently security guards, right? And then we're just asking teachers to do too much. Fortunately, we can have AI take some of that load off. AI can provide the content, the right content to the right person. It can be the delivery expert and figure out the optimal way for that individual on how to deliver that data in a way that they'll absorb it and be engaged with it. so that the teachers can focus on what they do best, which is enable the psychosocial development of the students that they're there to teach. So the way I see the world, and maybe I was a little too influenced by Star Trek back in the day, is pods where students are learning from a set of computers, but then get together to engage with each other so they can learn those so-called soft skills, which are absolutely critical for their development. Do you mind if I take a 2-minute break and run to the restroom?
Please do.
Why don't you continue asking questions?
We'll engage in witty banter.
Okay.
Instead of playing Jeopardy music, I'll ask Adam another question. So, so for the sake of controversy, let's say most of us were raised in an environment where the pinnacle of success meant becoming a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, a cop, kind of one of the traditional professions. Now, Adam and I both have small kids, and let's say we're at home talking to our kids about which of those is going to go away first. And part B of that question is, those are going away. What's going to replace them? What should our kids be thinking about doing?
I think anything that deals with sort of the complexities of human emotions and working with other humans is going to be the last thing that's going to be automated. I don't see certain kinds of mundane legal practice, like examining the contract and red flags, like that's going away. But criminal attorneys,
Are we offending lawyers?
attorneys,
Lawyers in the room? One lawyer.
Now,
That's less.
I'll even say the contracts are more nuanced as a guy who does investment concepts. Like we were at an event last night, 500 and other guys from GSV plug and play. The biggest thing people were looking at in the nuance was actually because of what's happening in the economy and what's going to happen with the crash coming in the next 3 to 6 months. Certain terms which people normally don't accept will be coming back. I can say active contracts, and that's why literally lawyers.
Okay.
And so
But that, I will quibble it. I think that generally
obvious
was
one to
things
start.
like lawyers, policemen. Of the examples that you gave, while there may be, help and that you can get like recommendations on drugs or treatments, from software, the general profession of a doctor and dealing with all the crazy social and emotional complexities of these things. All the examples you gave seem, at least to my lights, to be the least likely to be automated anytime soon.
I'd actually,
I'm going to say a controversial statement. I'm going to say, you've heard my AI is eating software. I'm going to say the vast majority, now there's this period of time where we move from coding business logic into our apps, which is what most enterprise app developers are doing. That is the majority of their time. To have people applying machine learning to have the business logic be emergent, I'm saying that will be automated. So the vast majority of enterprise app developers will be automated long before we have robot lawyers, doctors, and teachers.
pull the pin, throw the grenade. So I want to hear from stars of the show. So my friend here is the plant. So
I just really have strong
yes,
feelings.
your perspective on this.
So as a NLP machine learning guy that started to develop groups, we on our guys launch. I'm going to say there are two logical fallacies we assume here, like everybody inside of the bubble. One, we assume the human being's brain power is static, and its ability to be assisted with these technologies and developing and evolve are static. And I think that's a fundamentally flawed assumption. And secondly is that AI will ever get there. I mean, like, I'll say this as an example now, but something we're actually working on with the open web. AI is dying on solving large problems. I mean, Google's index, with the best AI in the world, the biggest search in the world, shows their index 4 times in 6 months, down 7.5 days. It's not doing a great job on a pretty static thing, index in the web. There are a lot of problems like that.
It's
So,
because they don't use cross-hole validation.
no, it's because cross-hole validation actually doesn't solve the problem of getting people to give you a link to the page to your index.
So I want to hear some other opinions. So
Yeah,
of those 4,
yeah.
kind of common, kind of canonical professions.
Which is
You're a home coaching your kids. Which of those is going away first, and where should they be investing in their education? We don't have a monopoly on the answer to this question.
You know, I'll follow up on this point actually. So I'm in radiology, so a branch of medicine, we look at X-rays, with CTs, MRI.
Yeah.
We think that would be the tip of the spear, right, when it comes to autism. All we do is image classification. We're literally just, deep neural networks.
Computers with scalpels.
And, well, so I just started a fellowship at Stanford. One of the fellows a couple years ago went to Google. And he said, look, I see this wave of AI coming. I want to get in ahead of this. Right? I want to join a company that has all of this talent and wants to try to push pull the boundaries of medicine. 2 years, nothing's come out. We heard about self-driving cars. Many years have passed, nothing's come out. Now, this is not to say that there isn't a lot of need for retraining. Possibly a lot of disruptions coming. But what we're looking at seems to be a very static economy. What are the growth areas in the economy? Healthcare, education, places where productivity growth is basically not happening until maybe a company succeeds and tries to turn over some of those tables. So I wonder about, are we looking at, a static economy? And is that why we're so worried about job loss? Isn't it a job? No, most job is going to get automated away. It's always not the first topic of this. I certainly understand that. I'm maybe on the chopping block. But think about the Star Trek analogy. So let's say we had a replicator, right? You make any gizmo you want, you make any beverage you want, you make any tool you want. If we had that, let's say, we've got a press release, Google's about a quarter away from putting out a Star Trek style replicator, is the first thing we worry about whose machining job's going to get cut? Or is it, this is awesome, we got a replicator. All you need is one, and if you're worried about losing your job, all you need is one share of Google stock. Once I sell that thing, man, you're going to be rich. You're not going to have to worry about all that. Well, AI is a replicator for human brains. AI is a replicator for human judgment. If we get all the things worked out, this should be a bounty beyond any of our imagination. But we're worried. We're scared. We're worried about jobs. We're worried about retraining. Seems a little bit odd.
Just to respond, I'm not really sure why we have certain more adoption of AutoMel in other areas, but one of the biggest areas that we're seeing is use in medical. And so let me try to jive that with why I don't think doctors are going away. So one of those conferences I just spoke at recently was called the Applied Machine Learning Conference. It was part of the TomTom Festival in Charlottesville. 90% is a room full of 200. Every single person was an applied machine learning scientist. Not a lot of them using AutoML, so it's a target-rich opportunity, but every single person sitting in that room, and there were some doctors, were using machine learning to diagnose this. A lot of looking at that image and saying, what's going on here? Lots and lots of deep neural networks to go try to classify these images. So if your question is, in order to do what the doctors do, where they look at the chart and then they say, you have this, and the book says that if you have this, then these are the treatments that we recommend. I agree, there'll be a lot less people doing that. But there's also, I would say there's almost unlimited opportunity of things that nobody solved yet, right? And so that is not what most machine learning medicine doing today is. It more is these are all these indicators that we have, this is what you have. And there's a little bit less of, even though I mentioned the health tree example of where we're trying to get, we've never figured out what we should do, we're guessing you should do this. That's decades away from attacking every disease. So my opinion from just being very close to this machine learning is there'll be tons of machine learning in medicine. These people were all using statistics before, so they all jumped on the machine learning bandwagon very quickly. But I think it frees up the doctors. I don't think your friend should have gone to Google. I think your friend should have said, I want to go be a researcher now and go attack the unsolved problems.
And I agree 100% with what you said. And the other part of what you were talking about is, where's the need to retrain people, right? Google's creating, or we are through AI, we're creating this replicator for our brain. So ostensibly, we don't need to work, right? And there are people who are proponents of that, right? Like Andrew Yang's solution to this is providing a freedom dividend or a UBI to every man, woman, child, or not children really, every man or woman above 18, to enable the bounty that we get from AI to go to everybody else. And definitely check out Andrew, he's awesome. But with that being said, we're in Silicon Valley. We all understand that we're moving to a marketplace where the number one organization wins everything, right? We all get that. And I don't know how many of you guys have spent a lot of time in the Midwest, but let me tell you a story about Maine. It's not in the Midwest, but it's very representative of what we're talking about. I spent a lot of time in Mississippi, Missouri, Wisconsin, Ohio, Texas, Tennessee, South and North Carolina, sitting down with these families. But let's talk about Maine. Do I smell?
No, I need to let you properly gesticulate. I love the arm.
I do use
I want
the
to
arms.
do that.
So in Maine used to produce about 90 to 95% of all the toilet paper here in the United States. You know what percentage of toilet paper they produce now? 0. All those people that work in those factories, what do you think happened to them? So Maine right now has one of the biggest problems in the country with fentanyl and these opioids. They had massive increase in suicide rates, massive increase in drug use. Why? You have a population who didn't get reskilled. The tech world left them behind. The movement in society when manufacturing moved overseas left them behind. And now what we're seeing is that problem times 10. Because we're not only talking about the people in Ohio and Michigan and a couple other states like Wisconsin, where all of the factories that used to produce cars, all those workers are now replaced with wall-to-wall machines. We're talking about every single job that requires repetitive manual labor and repetitive cognitive labor. So by the way, that includes accountants, that includes contract lawyers. There was a contest that they just did where they took 100 of the best contract lawyers in the country and they had them compete with a bunch of AI, and they found that the AI was able to do the work about 20 to 30x faster with 10x fewer mistakes than some of the best lawyers in the country that work on contracts. Because they can look through the contract, they don't have to read every word, right? It's not just coming for the cashiers at McDonald's. And by the way, McDonald's is going completely cashierless globally by 2020. What happens to all those people, right? These people have to be retrained. And a cashier at McDonald's does not own any Google stock, right? They are not going to benefit from this massive transformation that's happening in the economy. So I don't know if that was too long of an answer, but that's my perspective. I could be wrong. I'm open to be wrong.
All right, so we got time for one last question from the panel, then we're going to open it up. I want to make sure you have time for Q&A. So at Astound, we believe in a future where AI-driven automation gives us, say, an hour to 90 minutes additional leisure time per day. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, I think that's on the conservative side, and that's going to happen within 3 years. And we're just arrogant enough to think we're going to catalyze that trend. Just engage me in this thought experiment. Let's say globally, the workforce gets back 10, 15, 20% of its time to do something else. Question for the panelists is, are we more concerned about a future where AI is giving us that dividend of leisure time, or are we more concerned with a future where that doesn't? Which concerns you more?
I would be concerned more if it doesn't give us that dividend. If we find other ways to fill up our time. Because look, we're obviously seeing, and you guys know this better than anybody, we're seeing this massive spike in depression and anxiety and suicidal tendencies. And some of it we can blame on Facebook and Instagram and us looking at the highlight reels of other people's lives. But part of it as well has to do with the change in society, right? We evolved as a species that was very social, right? And our tribes, we had our extended families, our cousins, our aunts, our second and third cousins. I mean, I was born in Iran, so like my fourth cousins call me a cousin, and they like expect to have the same relationship with me as I have with my brother, right? That's all of you guys from Southeast Asia probably can relate to that. And so we are over time becoming more individualistic. Our family units constricted to mom, dad, and one sibling, a dog and a cat, right? Like a fence. And now we're going even further than that, where all of our friends are online. We have these micro relationships with people, where the relationships we have with our parents and our siblings is not what it used to be either. And so my suspicion is that if we're to use AI to its optimal effectiveness, we can then reinvest that additional time that we have when we're not working, rebuilding our communities, rebuilding true person-to-person interactions and relationships. And I think if we don't do that, we're going to have a lot of massive issues that we have to face, or adapt into a new species entirely and put computer chips in our brains and push off our emotions. But that's a completely separate conversation about transhumanism. So,
I think the dividend's already happening just in terms of like general automation of things. And I think that, it's very trendy to have the side hustle, but I think eventually everybody will have a side hustle and it won't necessarily be making money. So, I've mentioned what I do in my spare time, which is not a lot as a startup CEO, is work on interesting data science problems that I think are interesting and do social good. And for somebody else, it's, they're creating art or literature or music. It doesn't have to be a paid side hustle, but I think you're going to see the universality of that, whereas it used to just be restricted to the less than the 1%, become much more pervasive.
Good. So pose that to the group, but also open up the floor to any other questions. Are we more concerned with the impact of innovation, what we call progress, potentially the encroachment of AI on traditional jobs, or are we more concerned with that not happening? I'll leave that one dangling. Mateo, I know you had a comment. Take this one first.
This question is for you. You mentioned reproducibility, and you mentioned that if you have reproducibility, you can actually control the AI outcome. But I have a feeling that whether you are doing AI with a lot of reproducibility, there is still an inherent bias that you cannot control, and I don't think that fixes the problem of inherent bias in AI. That comes
Just
from the
to be
data.
clear, I'm not saying it is. It solves some other problems.
Okay.
Reproducibility solves the bad model problem, right? Things that where somebody claims, oh, it's a good model, it's going to make good decisions, but it doesn't really. It's like open source has been proved to be generate more reliable software over and over and over and over again because of the million eyes staring at it. That's why Linux is far more reliable than Windows or Mac OS. So if you want to do reliable systems, you do on Linux based because you have millions of eyeballs looking at it. So my point about reproducibility, so we have a million eyeballs looking at source code for open source, which is why it tends to be more reliable. Models are much more likely to stand up to the claimed accuracy if it's all reproducible. And I would maintain that most models that are used today are not reproducible. Most that are out there that people are making very high stakes decisions are not reproducible. So some data scientist has decided to not do tenfold cross validation, and they just go and tell their boss, yep, I got an R squared of 0.85, time to deploy. But in fact, you don't know it really is R squared of 0.85 because it hasn't permeated the culture yet. It has not permeated the culture of and I've seen this applying it myself for other people. Okay, this is the accuracy of your model. Everybody, you should always ask, if you're a customer data scientist, okay, where's the data set? How did you validate it? What are the features? Which is not to say that you still can't have there's an unintended social effect of something. But the point is, if you have reproducibility, you can be sure that this model that you think is good really is good.
That's what I'm saying, that even if a model is reproducible, even if it can give reproducible results, doesn't mean that it has actually tackled the problem of bias. So
But I wasn't making the claim. I wasn't making the claim about that. So I'm not arguing against your point at all. I'm sort of ceding the point. I'm saying there's other goals too. And one of the other goals is, geez, if you're going to make high stakes decisions about people, you really owe it to yourself to have an accurate model.
what I'm suggesting is that besides reproducibility, there should be something else that questions biases and models.
Yeah, I agree. I'm conceding it. Now, yes. Oh, yes, I'm conceding the point.
And it's
Yes.
time for two more questions. Your name and where you're from, just quickly.
My name is Nita Verdi. I work at Apple.
Okay, thanks for joining. I know Matteo had either a question or a comment, and we'll have time for one more.
Yeah, quick question. So my name is Matteo. I work at Astan. It's mainly for Brian, but for others, because it's a type of. I'm interested in how our values and principles shape the technology and the AI that we implement. For Brian in particular, so if I understand, you want to retrain people that are not young, that didn't do well in school. That's a great challenge, even for a good human teacher that can meet in person or regularly with this person. So, and that's one side of the problem. And at the same time, we have a very well-developed literature on pedagogy and related area like developmental psychology. So, the type of pedagogical principles that you're going to adopt can make a difference in whether you understand that you're truly successful, whether this person understand what you present, when, at which pace, how to assess, understand, and so on. So what's your process to select reliable pedagogical principles?
That's a fantastic question. So one of the things we did is a couple of the first advisors that I brought on our advisory were PhDs in education and developmental psychology at Stanford and Harvard. So we run all of our education-based questions through them. They work very actively with us. And we don't create any content ourselves. We're not a content company. We're not a content providers. What we do is we work with established educational institutions that have already put out a significant amount of content. As we all know, over the past year and a half, we've created more data and more content than the rest of the industry combined. We all know that, right? And so we take a lot of that data from a variety of different sources, tag all that data to make sure that they cover the exact same material within these sub-lessons and micro-lessons that are 7 to 12 minutes with micro-assessments to string throughout. To then determine for that specific micro-lesson, what does it specifically teach? What is the content? And so of all of the pieces of content, which one that person, that individual will look at that given point in time. Now, the reason, I definitely agree with you, by the way, that the cohort of people that we're trying to train, we are trying to solve a very difficult problem. That's just what I think is the problem that we want to solve. Now, it turns out in the 1984 Bloom study, which started this entire series of studies that enable us to understand what actually works out, it turns out that when people are taught one-on-one through personalized learning that takes into account their specific unique needs in that moment, that population, 90% of them score in the top 20th percentile when compared against all students. That's a delta of 70%. And what that tells me is the 70% that are not in the top 20% that learn through traditional learning models with a stand and deliver lecture format with a teacher explaining to 30 students, that 70% that don't do well on all those tests, we're failing them. It's not that they're dumb. It's not that they just naturally don't understand the material. It's just that they are not being taught in a way that they understand, because it turns out that your diet, the amount of nutritional intake that day, your sleep patterns, your activity level, the last time you had a fight with your significant other, all of these things, how good you feel about yourself in that moment, when was the last time you got a dopamine hit from your phone, all of these impact the optimal way for you to absorb information in that moment. And I would put to you that every single one of you learns differently at 8 a.m. versus 8 p.m., right? And so the question isn't, what is the right pedagogy to use in that specific situation? It's how do we give you the exact right information in the right format so it enables you to understand much more effectively. So another example to use, so I just spent a week with Sir Richard Necker. He famously had dyslexia. One of my advisors, Andy Russell, who runs MPAC with former Secretary General of the United Nations in Vancouver, he has this landscape. Both of those individuals in the traditional learning model, doesn't matter what pedagogy you use, unless they're taught in a very specific way for what is offered to them, they would not have been able to accomplish anything, right? And so the question then is, how many people do we have that fall through the cracks and we think that they're dumb? Not because of ADD or dyslexia, but any number of other things that we haven't even yet discovered, but they need to learn in a specific way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Those are very long answers.
Yeah, assessment theory.
All right, we're gonna continue Q&A as part of the networking session because we're now eating into your networking time. I do have one last question for you before we break. Hands up if you're looking for a job or looking for work. Hands up if you have a job, if you're hiring right now. All these stallions. Hands up. All right, that's where the networking starts. We have our next Future of AI and IT meetup. It's August 29th. We're going to continue this cage match. Different topic. Topic on August 29th will be, does the one with the most data really win? And we'll be joined by the leaders of AI for that. Before we wrap, special thank you to Brian and Alan. Thank you to Florence and Nikki and Derek as sponsors. My special thank you to all of you. Thanks for making this good. Mingle. Enjoy the food and drink.
All right. Say hi.